Hey fam, we're back with another banger. What if Naruto had divine harem with Ruby and Salem? So before we start, if you are craving adult mature content, join my Patreon now, link are in the description box. Alright, enough talk, let's fire it up. A stranger had come to the ever after. This one was particularly strange as strangers went. The curious cat certainly found him so downright enigmatic, really. After all, this was the first human he'd ever seen. Blue eyes, blonde hair, whiskered cheeks, a battered and bruised body wrapped up in the tattered rags of an orange-black jumpsuit. He was a mystery. Through and through, this one. Although he'd spoken little since they'd met, each word wrung from him was a prize. "Aren't you going to say anything else?" Quote. "This journey will go much faster if we fill it with conversation." Quote. "Have you lost your ability to speak?" Blue eyes snapped into scarlet. "You're making me angry, cat." "Aha," said cat, danced away before his guest could think to make a grab for him again. "He speaks. I'm sorry, that was rude of me. I'm sure you can, it's just, I've never seen anyone or anything quite like you." "What did you say you were again?" "Human." "And what?" He hopped over a stray log as they walked, "as a human." The whiskered warrior made an irritable noise. "Someone you're starting to annoy." For you see, as they traveled together, he was beginning to piece together the puzzle that comprised this human. The man had been blasted into the ever after by some sort of explosion. He'd arrived broken, back bowed by guilt, missing his right arm, and a bit of himself besides. With but a bit of prodding he told his tale, and with it the source of his grief. What a sad story it was. He'd fought and killed his best friend. Deliberately or accidentally, he couldn't be certain, only that he had lost his right arm for it, too. A pity. Hopefully he'd be able to grow it back. Could humans do that? Truly he was such a sad sight. One couldn't help but take pity on him. He certainly had when they'd first met. This long-haired blonde already had the beginnings of stubble forming on his jawline, which suggested he had been here months, yet he acted as if everything in this acre were new to him. Had he truly sat in one place for so long? Curiouser and curiouser. There was another explanation for it, of course. Unpleasant as it was. On a whim he voiced it. "You said you landed in a grove filled with clocks, correct?" I did. Time passes quickly there. It might explain our disheveled appearance." "I noticed." The blonde grumbled. "My hair's too damn long and I'm growing a beard." "Indeed," he retorted. "I dare say if you wore armor, it would have been quite rusted by now." A grunt was his sole response. There it was again, the wall between them. He'd spoken precious little since they met, and as such, the curious cat had come to see that his traveling companion was wounded in another sense. A malady of the mind, as it were. Poor thing. It made him want to take him to the tree all the more. This human was broken, so terribly twisted up inside by what he'd done, what he'd failed to do, that it was eating him alive. But they'd made a promise, he and this human. A pact that bound them. He trusted him to keep it, if nothing else. "There's a way out." "Good. Show me the way, and I'll take you with me when I leave." Lovely. It was a good deal. Simple, yet complex, as most deals were. Leaving implied traveling, which meant he needed a guide. The cat was all too happy to serve as such. His role here was a fulfilling one, but after a time it grew terribly boring doing the same thing over and over again. But the outside world. He knew next to nothing of this land called Remnant, and was eager to see it. He could endure the sullen anger of his guest for the sake of that goal. What he could not tolerate, however, was this infernal silence. Because he had questions. So very many questions. He couldn't contain himself and began badgering the blonde as he led him across another field. "Are all humans like you?" "No." "Are there more of you where you're from?" "Yes." "Why?" "Oh, you must be quite strong to survive such a wound." "Are you?" "Yes." "And are most humans like you?" "No." He tried one last time. "Are you going to keep doing that?" "Maybe." "No more one-word answers from you." He swatted the blonde's leg with a paw, drawing an angry hiss from him. "If I'm going to lead you to the tree, and you are making that very difficult, good sir, then the least you can do is humor me on our journey." The curious cat tilted his head. Surely a few words aren't too much to ask. Fine. Here at last, a tiny bit of light finally came back to those dull, tired blue eyes. What do you want to know? Excellent. He might be able to save this young man yet. Your name would be a good start. The man complied with a reluctant, gravelly grunt. Naruto. Well, then, Naruto. He bounded away, briefly balancing on his tail before righting himself once more. Allow me to ask another question before we move on to the next acre. Hurry up and ask. The blonde crossed both arms, mangled and otherwise. Before his burnt chest. We're losing daylight. Very well. Sitting on his paws, the cat regarded him. Who are you? Naruto looked away from him. Nothing. No response. He'd expected anger. A shout, at the very least. Some form of protest. Instead, the blonde sagged, right down to his shoulders. He ran a hand through his hair and something bleak blazed through his eye. Not panic, it was much too soon for that sort of thing, but anxiety all the same. His was the look of someone who had just confronted a terribly uncomfortable question and not liked the answers he found. No. Not at all. I don't know anymore, he confessed, breathing the words out on a sigh. I thought I did, and then I killed my best friend. If I couldn't honor my promise to her, if couldn't save him, then what good am I? Weary blue eyes turned on him, hollow and tired. What good am I? What good is a shinobi, who can't keep his word? Oh, dear. This one was more broken than he'd thought. Doubt was a terrible poison. It seeped right into your soul. That settled it. This human needed to be brought to the tree. The sooner, the better. But before that, Naruto needed an answer. A curious question indeed. He patted a paw against the ground. Let's answer your question with another question. Do you think yourself incapable of keeping your word? Naruto glared at him. How should I know? I already broke it once. Who's to say I won't do it again, by accident or otherwise? Or you might be perfectly fine, he posited in return. Everyone makes mistakes, you know. Not me. Naruto shook his head and started walking unsteadily down the road once more. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't be here. The curious cat watched him for a moment, flicked his tail once, then darted after him. Worry not, Tilda. We'll have you out of here soon enough. This was an entity standing at the precipice, a knife's edge, uncertain of which way he wished to fall. He'd seen the like before. Sooner or later he would have to choose. Once he left this place, would he go left, or right? Or perhaps he would choose the middle path and continue the balancing act. It was a terrible thing. Balancing between light and darkness. Those who walked that path broke more often than not, fell apart from the strain of it all. He was curious to see what would happen, what the human would become. Oh yes, most curious indeed. But letting him fall apart. Oh, no. The curious cat simply couldn't allow that to happen. After all, if this young man lost his mind, then who would take him to the human world? No matter. He'd dealt with broken things before. He'd keep this one together. There was another matter to consider as well. If portals into the ever after were opening all over the place, who know what or who might wind up here? Just thinking about it made him even more curious. Phenomena aside, it promised to be an interesting journey. Who knew what awaited them on the road ahead? Who knew where said road might lead them? Who knew what they might yet encounter? Certainly not him. There was an odd beauty in not knowing. After all, madness was catching. You broke your word, Naruto. You think I don't know that? It haunts me, plagues me. If I could take back what I did, I would. But I can't. Someone is dead because of me. Tilda a traveler. Tilting, tipping, teetering. The ever after was beautiful in the way a corpse is beautiful. Not dead, not exactly. But still, devoid of breath, devoid of meaning. The trees here bore blossoms, lush crimsons and porcelain whites. But they had no scent. No pollinators, no hunger to reach the sun. They were decorations at a funeral no one remembered to mourn. In the ever after, even time wandered, listless and unscheduled. The sky held no hour. Only a dull ache of light. The wind, if it still existed, had forgotten how to scream. Naruto walked. His footsteps were not defiant, not desperate, just inevitable. One arm dangled lifelessly. A dead limb attached to a dying dream. His cloak was a ruin of scorched threads and bloodless holes. Orange, once the color of promise, now clung to him like dried scabs, unseemly, but familiar. He wore it not out of pride, but because stripping it away would mean admitting there was nothing left underneath. Behind him, silent but for the whisper of grass underfoot, the curious cat followed. The cat purred, hopping lightly onto a low branch above. There's a word for the way you walk, you know. Naruto didn't look up, didn't speak. The cat's grin stretched, content to fill the silence on its own. Funereal. Rather fitting, don't you think? The quiet that followed was not heavy. It was hollow, like a church abandoned mid-prayer. Naruto kept walking. Why do you insist on silence? The cat asked, head tilting, voice syrup sweet with mock wonder. Not that I mind, truly. But silence is the voice of regret. And you, my dear Naruto, carry yours like a bell that never stops tolling. He stopped. The way his neck turned, as if his very gaze were chained to grief, spoke more than his voice ever could. But still, he spoke. I'm still deciding whether I deserve to live. The cat's grin stayed, but its tail froze mid-sway. Oh, I killed my best friend, Naruto said, voice low and rusted. She asked me to stop him. Begged me. I gave her my word. I made a promise to myself. Each sentence fell like stones into black water. No splash, only depth. And in the end, a pause. A breath sharp with the taste of ash. I did what I had to. I killed him anyway. He looked down at his hand, scarred. Trembling, empty. It wasn't justice. Or mercy. It was just, the only path left. The cat hopped from the branch with a whisper of motion, landing beside him. Its voice was softer now. No longer amused. Merely present. Did it hurt? Naruto's laugh was a dry, pitiful rasp. I think I forgot how to feel pain. This is what's left after pain. When even agony runs out of things to say. The cat sat beside him, curling into the grass like a shadow folding inward. Then perhaps, it said, you are not dead because you deserve to live. But because your story hasn't ended yet. Naruto didn't answer. He stood beneath a sky embalmed in stagnation, unchanging, uncaring. Beside him, a cat too knowing to be innocent. And within him, a question. Did he even deserve to ask for the end? Did you mean to? The cat asked, softly, like a scalpel slipping between ribs. I don't know. That was the closest thing to honesty he could manage. So they walked. Every step was a hesitation. Every breath, a reluctant betrayal of death. He wasn't alive, not really. He was just a vessel sealed by regret, wandering a world that refused to kill him. He had landed here in fragments. His body was whole, but the soul inside had been shattered so finely, even grief could no longer find its shape. And the cat had found him. Not out of kindness, not even curiosity, but boredom, observation. It didn't try to fix him. Didn't pretend to understand. It merely watched. And somehow, that was worse than being abandoned. Because silence implied potential. But witnessing, that made his ruin real. I thought this place was supposed to change people, Naruto muttered, voice scraping the bottom of a dried-up well. It is, the cat replied. But change is not always rebirth. Sometimes, it is. Revelation. Naruto clenched his jaw. Then I guess I was always a failure. No. The cat sprang ahead, then pivoted, walking backward on two legs like a marionette of mockery. Its grin never faltered, but something older hid in its eyes. You were always a fool. There's a difference. Naruto let out a sound, a half-choked thing that began as a laugh and died a cough. Same thing, he said. No. The cat repeated, more gently this time. A failure is someone who couldn't. A fool is someone who tried. They fell into silence. It was near the edge of a glade that they found her. The sky above hung sick and swollen, a bruise that refused to heal. Clouds loomed like vultures over carrion, heavy and motionless, as if the heavens themselves had forgotten how to breathe. The scent in the air was that of scorched silence, dust, and lightning, and the aftermath of a scream. She lay beneath a gnarled tree, its twisted limbs frozen mid-reach, as though even the forest mourned. Her cloak was a ruin. Her armor, cracked and blackened. Her hair spilled out like bleeding moonlight, tangled with the soil as though she had fallen not from battle, but from a memory. And her fingers twitched, grasping blindly, for something that no longer existed. Naruto approached without pause. He no longer feared the illusions this world conjured. Whether they came with fangs or sobs, claws or curses. He accepted them as natural as breath. If the ever-after sought to wound him, so be it. But this was different. This wasn't a wound. It was a reflection. The woman stirred as he knelt beside her. Her breathing was shallow, brittle. When her eyes opened, they were a bloodshot silver rimmed by red, not the red of rage or magic, but of blood diluted by despair. Her gaze found his, if only briefly, before drifting again into the fog of not knowing. Raven, she whispered, a name that cut the air like a blade dulled by time. Naruto blinked, baffled. Who? No, that's not right. Her brows creased. I don't remember. Her voice was dry parchment. Her confusion, avoid swallowing what little was left of her. I don't. The cat landed on Naruto's shoulder without sound, tail curling like a question mark. Oh ho. Another fallen star. The ever after does so love its tragedies. Can you move? Naruto asked, ignoring him. She tried. Her body shuddered, resisted, then failed her. No, she murmured, shaking. No, I don't know where I am. Or who I am. Her breath trembled with panic. I think I was doing something important. I wasn't alone. There was fire. Someone was screaming. I was screaming. Her hands clenched the earth like it could anchor her to a self she had already lost. Naruto placed his only hand on her shoulder. It's all right. Her body tensed. No, it's not. She cried, surging upward. Pain exploded through her frame. He saw it when she clinched and collapsed again, curling in on herself. It's not all right. Tears welled in her eyes, silent and without purpose. I forgot. And the worst part is that I know I forgot, but can't remember what. I've lost everything. Naruto looked to the cat. She has aura, it mused. But she doesn't belong to your world, either. Not entirely. The ever after collects broken things. And she is very broken. Naruto turned back to the woman. Who are you? He asked, gently. She blinked, trembling, lost. Rose, she said at last. That's all I can remember. My name is Rose. The name landed in Naruto's chest like a dying star. It meant nothing, and yet it hurt, as if he'd once heard it spoken by someone he never had the chance to mourn. Rose, then, he said, steadying her. You're not alone. She laughed, but there was no joy. Only the hollowness of someone who'd stared too long into an empty grave. Aren't I? She whispered. I don't even know what I've lost. Naruto nodded. Neither do I, he said. But I carry it anyway. They made camp in the glade. Not out of need, but out of inevitability. Rose couldn't walk far. And Naruto, to be honest, he no longer believed in the idea of forward. The cat sprawled lazily in a shaft of half-light, chasing its tail in idle spirals. Even its movements seemed subdued, as if mocking the stillness around them. Rose sat near the fire, knees drawn to her chest, watching the flames consume wood as if it were atonement. What's this place called? She asked at last. Naruto didn't look at her. He didn't need to. The ever after. She let the words sit on her tongue like a foreign prayer. Then, is it heaven? His jaw clenched. No. She turned, her gaze searching. Hell. Then, he shrugged, the gesture slow, brittle. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's just what's left. Silence fell again. Not awkward. Not heavy. Just true. You don't talk like a hero. She said eventually. Naruto smiled. It wasn't warmth. It wasn't bitterness. It was the sound of glass cracking under pressure too long ignored. I'm not. You saved me. He had. I don't know why. There was no modesty in the answer. No false humility. Just resignation. Thank you anyway, she whispered. He ignored her and stared into the fire. It didn't dance. It burned. Slow. Merciless. I think I was supposed to be a symbol once, he said. Hope. Peace. The future, maybe. His eyes darkened with memory, the kind that eats from the inside out. But when the time came to make peace, I chose war. He drew in a breath that didn't ease anything. I told myself it was mercy. Memories flashed through his broken mind, warped and shattered. That killing him was the only way to save him. The only way to stop everything else from falling apart. He closed his eyes to shut them out, yet they only came on stronger. But it wasn't mercy. It was fear. I was afraid he wouldn't stop. Afraid I couldn't stop him. Afraid of what I'd become if I let him go. The fire crackled softly. Rose didn't interrupt. She didn't try to mend something she couldn't name. She just listened. I keep wondering, he said. Voice thinner now, what would have happened if I'd let him go? Maybe he'd be alive. Maybe the world would have burned. He looked down at his hand, the one that still remained. I'll never know, he whispered. That's the curse. Rose glanced at her own hands. Pale, trembling, they looked like they belonged to a stranger. I think I failed too, she said. Someone I cared about. I can feel it. I was trying to protect them. But I was too slow. Or too weak. She swallowed. I don't even know what their face looked like. There's an outline in my mind, like a dark shadow. Naruto looked at her. There was no judgment in his gaze. Just shared ruin. Do you want to remember? He asked. Her lips trembled. No, but I need to. That, more than anything, he understood. When she inched forward, he didn't push her away. When she laid her head on his shoulder, he didn't resist. When she succumbed to sleep and began to snore, he almost smiled. Within a matter of moments, he was fast asleep. Quote. From his high perch in the tree, the curious cat watched them, two flickers of broken light in a world that had forgotten the sun. A shinobi mourning the friend he killed, the cat murmured. A warrior mourning the memory she lost. His tone was light, but not necessarily cruel. What a wretched pair of broken things. And then, he began to smile. A small, fleeting thing. Hopeful. But the most curious thing about broken things, is how often they keep walking. And inevitably, they repair themselves. What would they become, he wondered. Something wonderful. Something terrible. Something what was both. Neither. He was curious. Would they give up and spend the rest of their lives here? Settle down. Start a family. Would they try to leave someday, perhaps? Would they let him come with them? Many questions. Curiosity gnawed at him like so many teeth, biting, gnashing, grinding him down. He had to know the answers, needed them like the very air in his lungs. If only because he'd been born this way, cursed to constantly question. He was cured with curiosity. He needed to know everything. But more than anything, he needed to know why his makers had left him here. Such was his want, the nature bestowed upon him by the brothers from the very moment of his creation. In that way, he was no different from them. He knew there was something wrong with him. That there was an inherent flaw in his nature, but he didn't know how to fix it. Perhaps he too, needed to break himself before he could become whole. After all, that which was broken rarely healed the same way. And he was in desperate need of healing himself, wasn't he? He needed the tree, needed to get out of this place out away from the ever after before he went mad. Yet there was no one to guide him to the tree now, was there? It was his duty to do the guiding, the fixing, the mending of broken hearts for the poor afterns ever and always. How did one guide oneself? Answer. You didn't. You could not. It wasn't possible. His claws bit into the bark as he hissed softly and shook his head, tamping down a sudden, spiteful surge of self-loathing. He could not reach the tree anymore, not by himself, not alone. But these two, they might be the key to everything. This, Naruto, and this, Rose, were badly broken in their own way, and he longed to fix them, as he fixed others. That meant taking them to the tree. That, he could do. That was a part of his purpose. That was allowed by the ever after. And perhaps while he was there, he could finally break his chains once and for all. Be free. Yet to do so, he needed these two, and possibly any other strays they might pick up along the way. Should he trust them? Be honest. Did he dare? Gah! The questions gnawed at him once more. With a long-suffering sigh, the cat settled into watch and wait. He was, if nothing else, curious. Naruto dreamed of thunder. In the dream, a storm roared at the edge of a broken valley. He stood at its center. Rain and ash swirling around as a figure approached, faceless yet painfully familiar. Lightning split the sky, and for an instant the specter had a face, eyes filled with disappointment. A mouth forming a single accusatory word that Naruto couldn't hear but felt in his bones. He tried to speak, tried to say I'm sorry, but the wind howled, ripping the words from his lips. The figure fell to its knees. Blood stained the rain. Naruto reached out with one hand, only the one, and as he did, the distant storm surged forward and swallowed them both. He woke with a start, heart hammering against his ribs. The dull half-light of the ever-after greeted him, unchanged and indifferent. There was no storm here, only the quiet haze of a world without shadows or sun. His breath came shallow and fast. A dream. Just another dream. Yet he could still feel the echo of that wordless accusation, like a phantom pain in a limb long lost. Naruto sat up, careful not to disturb the slight weight against his side. Sometime in the night, Rose had curled up beside him, her head resting on his remaining shoulder. She was still asleep, long lashes fluttering against pale cheeks. For a moment, the sight of her, peaceful, vulnerable, pushed back the darkness of the nightmare. He remembered how she'd clung to him the night before, how she'd listened to his sins without judgment. How she'd quietly shared her own emptiness. In sleep, the harsh lines of fear were softened. She looked younger, almost like. Naruto winced and looked away. He didn't deserve to draw comfort from anyone, not after what he'd done. Still, he gently shifted, easing her off his shoulder as he rose to his feet. Rose murmured faintly but did not wake. The ever-after's grass was cool beneath his fingers as he stood, stretching the stiffness from his muscles. Above, the sky was a uniform sheet of gray, offering no clue whether it might be morning or evening. Time in this place was as hollow as everything else. Naruto ran a hand through his hair and released a slow breath, willing the last traces of the nightmare to fade. It was already slipping away, leaving only that unsettled feeling he couldn't name. Behind him, a soft thump announced the curious cat's arrival on the ground. "Restless, are we?" purred the feline, its tone caught between a whisper and a yawn. It slunk closer, tail looping lazily in the air. "Bad dreams, dear Naruto." He regarded the feline silhouette out of the corner of his eye. Those ever-watching emerald eyes gleamed with concern, or perhaps just curiosity. With the cat it was hard to tell. "I'm fine," he lied quietly. The cat clicked its tongue. "Tut tut. A polite person would say, thank you for standing watch all night, oh gracious cat, while I slept like a kitten." Naruto only grunted at the jibe. He doubted the cat ever truly slept. More likely it had been observing him even in the dark, cataloging every toss and turn. A sudden rustle drew his attention back to Rose. She stirred, brow pinching as if disturbed by some dream. Of her eyes fluttered open, twin pools of unfocused silver. For a heartbeat, she looked lost all over again. He remembered that feeling, waking up and hoping everything had been a nightmare, only to realize the emptiness was real. Rose's gaze drifted until it found him. "Naruto?" she asked softly, voice still rough with sleep. He nodded. "I'm here." She sat up slowly, her movement stiff. Naruto noticed her wince as she braced herself with one arm. Beneath the grime and dried blood of yesterday's fall, her knuckles were raw. She must have tried to break her landing when she arrived in the ever-after. A human instinct, to fight even gravity on the way down. It almost made him smile. "Almost. How are you feeling?" he asked. Rose managed a weak smile. "Sore. But alive." "Alive is a good start," the cat chimed in brightly. It bounded closer to Rose, peering at her with its head tilted upside down. "You certainly snore loud enough to convince anyone of that." Rose blinked in confusion, then flushed faintly. "I was snoring." The cat opened its mouth in a wide yawn that might have been the second cousin grin. "Like a chainsaw, my dear. Most unbecoming for a pretty thing like you." Naruto shot the cat a warning look, and it merely shrugged, wholly unrepentant. Rose, however, surprised them both with a quiet laugh. Only a single breath of amusement, but real. Naruto realized it was the first time he'd heard her laugh at all. "I suppose some habits survive even memory loss," she said, wrapping her arms around herself as if embarrassed. The mirth faded from her eyes, replaced by a fragile uncertainty. "I think I dreamed of fire. Screams. But it all went away when I woke up." She shook her head as if to clear it. "It's like my mind teases me with pieces of who I was, only to snatch them back." Naruto felt an unexpected urge to reach out, to place a comforting hand on her shoulder. He resisted, clenching his fist at his side. "Memories will come when they're ready," he said, though he wasn't sure if it was true. "For now, we focus on moving forward." Rose looked down at the grass. "Forward," she echoed, tasting the word. "Right. The tree," the cat said, "it might help us." At the mention of the tree, the curious cat's ears perked up. It leapt onto a mossy rock, striking a theatrical pose. "Indeed I did. The tree, illustrious in all healing, root of escape and restoration, lauded in story and song. And on the other side of this entire damn realm," Naruto interrupted. He hadn't forgot. And how distant their goal seemed when described. Still, it was a goal. In a life defined by loss and aimlessness, a goal meant something. The cat sniffed. Details. Distance is relative here. And have I mentioned I'm an excellent guide? It puffed out its chest proudly. After all, who better to lead you through the ever-changing acres of the ever-after than a native expert such as myself? Snarky little bastard. Still, Naruto sighed and glanced at Rose. If we're going to do this, we should get moving. Rose nodded and pushed herself carefully to her feet. Idly, he noticed she still wore tattered remnants of a cloak over black combat leathers. The cloak's color might once have been white, but now it was stained gray and brown from ash and dirt. Whatever emblem or design it might ha. They born was scorched beyond recognition. She wavered slightly as she stood, and unbidden he found himself reflexively stepping closer in case she needed support. She caught his eye and offered a deep-mind nod and unspoken assurance that she could manage. He didn't argue. Instead, he knelt and scooped up a long branch from near last night's fire, one end burned to charcoal. With a few swift strokes of his kunai, a blade pilfered from one of his own ruined pouches, Naruto sharpened the branch into a makeshift walking stick. He handed it to Rose. She accepted it with a small word of thanks. Leaning lightly on the staff, she took a tentative step. Satisfied that she wouldn't collapse, Naruto turned away to gather what little they had. There was nothing to pack, the fire had died to embers, and none of them carried more than the clothes on their backs. He tugged his own threadbare orange cloak tighter around himself. It was a sorry thing, full of holes and weary as he was, but it still kept the chill off. The cat was already prowling at the edge of the glade, anxious to be off. The morning, if it is indeed morning, finds us well, does it not? Two humans mostly intact, one dashing feline guide, and a grand journey ahead. It gestured with a paw toward a gently curving path beyond the trees, where pale light filtered through like the memory of sunshine. Adventure awaits Tilda. Naruto glanced back at Rose. She squared her shoulders and gave him another nod, more resolute this time. He noticed in her eyes a faint spark, a resolve to keep going despite the unknowns. It was something he recognized deeply, distantly. Within himself. Foolish, stubborn hope. For the first time since he arrived in this world, Naruto felt a flicker of purpose reawaken. Not for his own sake, perhaps, but for those beside him. He started walking. Rose followed, and the curious cat trotted alongside, humming an off-key tune to itself. They left the glade of their meeting behind and ventured into the ever-shifting acres of the ever-after. They soon learned that, ever-changing, was no mere turn of phrase. As they walked, the landscape itself shifted like a dream trying to recall its form. One moment the path was winding through a grove of colossal mushrooms that glowed faintly blue with each step they took. The next, it led them out into a field of towering dandelions, each fluffy white globe of seeds as big as a man's head. Rose paused as they emerged into that field, her eyes widening at the sight. Naruto couldn't blame her. When he brushed against one of the giant dandelion stems, the sphere of seeds burst apart, not chaotically, but in a deliberate swirl. The seeds hung glittering in the air, then slowly drifted in a circular dance around the travelers. They moved with purpose, tracing Y spirals as if carried by an invisible breeze. Rose reached out with a tentative hand. A cluster of glowing seeds swirled around her fingers, reacting to her presence. She gave a soft gasp. There, warm, she said in wonder. Naruto watched as the white motes twirled around Rose's open hand. A few alighted on her palm like tiny stars. They pulsed with gentle light, illuminating her face. For an instant, he could have sworn he saw something in that light, a phantom flicker of an expression crossing Rose's features. Longing, perhaps, or sorrow. The curious cat trotted ahead unconcernedly. Ah, the dandelion acre. Mind the pollen too much will make you dance in circles for hours. It chuckled to itself, as if recalling some private joke. I once led an adversary of mine on a merry chase through this place. What fun, what fun. Naruto put a hand on Rose's shoulder, gently guiding her to keep moving. Come on, he murmured. A part of him wished they could linger just a bit longer, as something peaceful about the floating lights, but the cat seemed intent on pressing forward, and so did he. The tree was still far off, a hazy silhouette on the horizon whenever the sky lightened enough to see it. They continued, pushing through the field as the cloud of dandelion seeds gradually drifted away behind them. Rose cast one last glance back, a strange mix of a smile and a frown on her lips. Naruto wondered what she felt. Was she remembering something in that brief moment of beauty? Or was it simply the ache of not remembering at all? Soon, the giant flora gave way to stranger sights. They passed an area where the ground was tiled like a checkerboard, black and white squares alternating under their feet. Broken chess pieces larger than houses lay strewn about, as if a giant had abandoned a game midway. A toppled king here, a cracked knight there. Rose stared at them in confusion. What happened here? The cat hopped onto the fallen bust of a chess knight. Oh, a quarrel between two brothers, I suspect. It tapped the knight's marble mane. These pieces have been here a very long time, since before even I was created. Naruto eyed the scattered pieces warily. They made him think of battlefields back home, littered with the remnants of jutsu and broken weapons. The aftermath of his battle with him. He shook the thought off and led the way, stepping over a split rook lying across the path. Beyond the chess field, the air grew still and heavy. A low mist clung to the ground, coiling around their ankles. The cat, for once, ceased its prancing and stuck close to Naruto's side. Rose tightened her grip on her makeshift staff. Without the cat's running commentary or the novelty of giant flowers, an uneasy silence fell over the group. Naruto's senses prickled. Something about the mist set him on edge. It wasn't the same as a ninja's intuition for an ambush, more like an instinct in his soul, warning him that this place would play tricks. Sure enough, shapes began to form in the fog. At first they were indistinct, nothing more than denser whorls of white in the gray soup of air. Then Naruto saw one ahead on the trail, roughly human-shaped. He halted and held out an arm to stop Rose. A figure stood in the mist before them. It was a man, or the outline of one, dressed in the flowing robes of a Leaf Village Jonin. Naruto's heart skipped. Leaf Village. Here. He phantom man's face sharpened into view. His dark hair was pulled back, and a scar marked the bridge of his nose. Iruka-sensei. Naruto knew, rationally, it could not be Iruka. His old teacher was a world away if he was even alive. But in that moment, seeing that familiar, kindly face peering from the fog, Naruto felt like the child he once was, lonely, desperate for approval. The illusion of Iruka beckoned silently. Then turned and walked into the mist, dissolving into swirling tendrils. Before Naruto could fully regain his bearings, more shapes appeared at the edges of their vision. To the right, Rose let out a soft cry. Naruto whirled to see her reaching into the fog, toward two small figures that stood just out of arm's length. They were silhouettes of children, a little girl with a hooded cloak and another slightly older with long hair. The two held hands. Though their features were hazy, Rose's trembling fingers and watery eyes said enough. Whoever the children were, some buried part of her recognized them. "Mama," came a tiny, echoing voice from the direction of the little hooded girl. Rose staggered forward. Who are? Her voice cracked. Naruto caught her by arm before she could stumble blindly into the mist. "Rose, don't." His voice came out more sharply than he intended. She twisted in his grip, eyes shining with sudden tears. "But I know them," she whispered. "I think I know them." Her gaze returned to the phantom children who lingered at the edge of perception, giggling innocently as they darted deeper into the white haze. Rose tried to pull free from Naruto's grasp. "Please," she cried, a raw desperation in her tone that Naruto knew far too well. It was the sound of a heart breaking at the thought of hope vanishing. He tightened his hold. She was surprisingly strong in her urgency, but he was stronger. "They're not real," he said firmly. It tore at him to see her in such pain, but he couldn't let her chase ghosts. He knew too well the traps this world laid. "Rose, listen to me. Whatever you see, it's a trick of the ever after." Rose shook her head, anguish painting her features. "But, what if they're not? What if I lost them?" Each word wavered on her lips. "Those girls. I feel like I'm supposed to protect them." Naruto swallowed hard. His own illusion had been of someone who protected him in childhood. Hers were of those she needed to protect. He didn't know what cruel logic the ever after used, but it was prying at their deepest wounds. Behind them, the curious cat hissed, fur bristling. "Keep moving." Quickly, the cat urged, its voice unusually low. "This acre feeds on longing. If you tarry too long, you'll forget what's real." Naruto believed it. Already the edges of his vision threatened to close in with OT. Her figures, a tall man with white hair and a forehead protector tilted jauntily, standing off to his left, Jiraiya. And somewhere behind, he swore he heard the faint echo of a woman's voice, gentle and kind. Humming a lullaby he almost remembered, a mother he had never known. Gritting his teeth, Naruto did the only thing he could. He slid his arm from Rose's and instead took hold of her hand firmly. "Come on," he said, meeting her tearful eyes. "We have to go. Now." Rose stared at him, breath unsteady. The shadows of the two children danced just beyond her, laughter drifting like a cruel breeze. Naruto squeezed her hand, anchoring her. "They're not real," he repeated, softer now but no less urgent. "Trust me." Something in his tone, or maybe the sheer solidity of his hand around hers, seemed to reach her. Rose blinked, a tear spilling down her cheek. She closed her eyes, shutting out the sight of the children, and gave a single shaky nod. Together, still holding hands, they walked forward through the clammy mist. Naruto kept his gaze fixed ahead, refusing to look at the illusions that flickered at the corners of his vision. He could sense Rose trembling with each step, could Praktika feel the yearning in her to turn back and run toward those phantom voices. But she stayed with him, step by step. The cat trotted at their heels, unusually quiet. Its ears were pressed flat against its skull as if the visions bothered it too, though likely for different reasons. "You're learning," it murmured, possibly to itself, possibly to them. "Pain makes for powerful ghosts in this place." Naruto didn't respond. The mist began to thin after what felt like an eternity. Gradually, the pressure of unseen eyes and unheard voices eased. At last, the white fog released them, and the world opened up once more into light and space. Rose exhaled a shuddering breath. Naruto realized he'd still been clutching her hand. He released it gently. She immediately wrapped her arms around herself, shoulders hunched as though cold. "I'm sorry," she whispered, not meeting Naruto's gaze. "I almost." "Don't," Naruto said. He took a step away, scanning their surroundings for any lingering threat. "This acre, it knows how to hurt us. It wasn't your fault." Rose wiped at her cheeks, seeming ashamed of her tears. She nodded, but a cloud of melancholy hung over her now. Naruto recognized it, the hollowness of having hope dangled in front of you and snatched away. In truth, his own heart ached from the specters he'd seen. Faces long gone, some he could never save. The ever after had a way of healing open wounds he thought scarred over. "At least," the cat piped up, attempting a lighter tone, "you didn't forget yourselves entirely. The last fellow who wandered through there is probably still chasing his own tail, poor chap." It hopped onto a rock, shaking out its fur with a dramatic shiver. "Nasty little acre, that one. I'd say we deserved a reward for getting through unscathed, wouldn't you?" Naruto gave the cat a flat look. He was hardly in the mood for its theatrics just now. The cat cleared its throat. "Ahem. Yes, well, onward." Naruto turned to Rose. "Still with me." She was pale, but she straightened at his words. "I'm okay," she said, though her voice was quiet. "Thank you, for stopping me." He managed a short nod. "We stop for each other. That's how we keep going." The words came out before he fully thought them through, an echo of something he used to believe, back in another life. He expected to feel hollow saying them, but oddly, he didn't. If anything, he felt a grim certainty. He had failed to save the friend who once meant everything to him. He would not fail these people now, not if he could help it. Resolve settled in him like a stone sinking in a pond. It made no grand splash, but sent ripples through his being nonetheless. They pressed on. The terrain grew harsher now, gnarled tree roots snaked across the path, and the sky overhead dimmed to a sullen charcoal. It might have been late in the day, but in the ever after there was no telling. Naruto only knew that his body felt the toll of their travels, and Rose moved with weariness in her steps. Then the curious cat had fallen uncharacteristically silent, ears twitching at every distant creak of wood or rustle of unseen foliage. When the attack came, it was nearly without warning. A blur of Tian exploded from behind a twisted tree trunk to their left. Naruto caught the movement in his peripheral vision, something tall, thin, and impossibly fast. He barely had time to shove Rose aside before a clawed arm scythed through the space she'd just occupied, raking 4 deep gashes in the air. Rose hit the ground with a gasp. Naruto spun to face their assailant, placing himself between her and it. His eyes widened at the sight. The creature was like nothing from Remnant or the Elemental Nations, a towering, emaciated figure with a body of dark purple-black, as if ink and shadow had been woven into flesh. It had elongated limbs and a face that looked like a cracked mask, lupine and alien all at once. Its mouth hung open unnaturally, lined with jagged fangs, but the jaw didn't move when it spoke. Spoke it did, in a voice like clattering bones, SSS's, stalking. Seeking. The words were a low hiss that reverberated through the trees. The Jabberwocker, the cat spat, fur puffing up in alarm. It had leapt back several paces and now crouched on a high branch, well out of reach. It found us. Naruto cast an annoyed look at his would-be comrade, not at all comprehending. Jabber, what now? The curious cat didn't answer immediately, instead it slunk back several paces. Whatever you do, don't let it kill you. There's no coming back from that. Rose gulped where she lay. People are supposed to die when they're killed. The cat tutted. Silly girl, for us Afterans, death here is only permanent where that thing is concerned. The Jabberwocker twisted its head toward the cat mid-speak and it eyes, if it indeed had eyes, burning with feral focus. Hungry, it rasped. Naruto positioned his feet, raising his only hand defensively. His heart thundered not with fear, but adrenaline. Rose, get up and move back, he ordered, never taking his gaze off the creature. Slowly now. Rose, still on the ground where he'd pushed her, nodded shakily and began to crawl back from the immediate danger zone. The Jabberwocker's head snapped in her direction at the rustle. In an instant, it lunged. Despite its gaunt frame, the thing moved with terrifying speed. It covered the distance to Rose in 1 pounce. Claws extended to rend and snatch. Naruto was faster. Chakra flared through his body, and in a blink he was there, intercepting the creature with a forceful kick to its midsection. The impact was like striking solid rock, but it achieved the purpose. The Jabberwocker was knocked off its trajectory, crashing sideways into a tangle of roots. It let out a guttural shriek that made the air shiver. Graw. Naruto landed between Rose and the creature, dust billowing around his feet. He spared her a quick glance. You hurt. Rose scrambled up to stand behind him, eyes wide. I'm all right, she managed. Though fear laced her voice. A furious chittering snarl drew Naruto's attention back. The Jabberwocker was already recovering, its lanky form unfurling from the roots with unsettling fluidity. A strip of its inky flesh hung loose where his vicious kick had connected, but no blood poured from the wound. Instead, some viscous dark ichor dripped, and even as he watched, the substance began to harden, forming a patchy shell over the injury. It was healing, in its own twisted way. It fixed its hollow gaze on Naruto now. Fight, fight, it hissed, as if declaring its intent. Naruto tensed. The creature was clearly after living prey after them. This wasn't like any opponent he'd ever known, this thing simply hungered. It wanted, it needed, it craved. If it got past him, it would not spare Rose nor the cat. He felt a flicker of something almost like anticipation stir in his chest. A confrontation. This, at least, was straightforward, a threat he could face head-on. Not an illusion or a memory he couldn't fight. The Jabberwocker struck again. It bounded forward on all fours, then leapt high, bringing both clawed hands down toward Naruto with crushing force. He darted aside. The claws smashed into the ground where he'd stood, splintering the earth. Before it could pull back, he thrust out his palm. Chakra surged, coalescing blue and bright in his hand. A whirling Rasengan formed with a whine of power and he slammed it into the creature's arm. It drilled into the Jabberwocker's lanky limb, tearing through that uncanny flesh. The creature shrieked, a discordant sound of static and rage. Its arm came off at the shoulder, dissolving into black vapor as it hit the ground. Naruto allowed himself a tight, grim smile. So it could be hurt. An old saying pierced the fog of his mind. If it bleeds, it can be killed. The Jabberwocker did not flee. Though one arm was gone, it pressed the attack undaunted. Its tail whipped around from the side, catching Naruto off guard and striking him across the ribs with the force of a battering ram. He grunted, skidding sideways. The creature seized the opening and barreled into him full on with a shout before he could hope to plant his feet. Food. They fell in a tangle of limbs and claws. Naruto snarled as he felt talons scrabbling against his chest, trying to find purchase to rip him open. The Jabberwocker's maw gaped inches from his face, reeking of decay. He wrestled with it, one arm against its remaining claw, his feet digging into the dirt to hold back its weight. Despite its gaunt look, it was monstrously strong, stronger than almost anything he'd fought in a long time. Yet he realized with a sudden clarity that he was holding back. Some buried sense of caution, born of guilt and sorrow, had been shackling his power since he arrived in this world. Now, with Rose behind him, in danger and this abomination clawing at him, those chains began to fracture. His eyes blazed. A hot well of chakra bubbled up from his gut. He felt his heartbeat quicken, pulse synchronizing with a deeper thrum of energy that he knew intimately. A voice, ancient and familiar, growled in the back of his mind. Finally ready to fight. Naruto's lips drew back in something between a grin and a snarl. He stopped pushing against the creature and instead pulled, yanking it closer even as its slavering jaws snapped. The Jabberwocker hesitated, momentarily confused by its prey's action. He took full advantage of that. You think you can eat me, you ugly son of a. Naruto growled, bracing his knee under the creature's torso. With a surge of chakra, he heaved, flipping the towering beast onto its back and pinning it. His voice dropped into a feral register, an edge of a deeper timbre bleeding through. I'll eat you. For an instant, Naruto's blue eyes burned molten orange, pupils slitting into vulpine slashes. Spectral chakra burst forth around him in a blazing aura of gold. It took the shape of a massive fox's head enveloping his own. The creature beneath him thrashed, suddenly squealing in what sounded like fear. No, it screeched, the first recognizable word in its bestial vocabulary. Yes, Naruto snarled back. The chakra fox's jaws clamped down over the Jabberwocker's throat. There was a sound like a thunderclap, and the beast's scream cut off. In a wet crunch, in one swift motion, Naruto tore the creature's head from its body. Black ichor sprayed and evaporated into smoky wisps as the remains of the Jabberwocker twitched and then fell still. Silence crashed down in the wake of the struggle. Naruto knelt there, panting once, twice, over the creature's carcass. The golden aura around him flickered and faded, receding back into the seal within. He released the ruined throat from his grip, letting the Jabberwocker's head dissolve into black mist. It was over. He stood, wiping a splatter of inky blood from his cheek with the back of his hand. Not a single scratch marked him. The creature hadn't managed to truly wound him. Its earlier blow was already scarcely a dull ache thanks to the chakra now coursing through his veins. Power and clarity hummed in him, the battle high slow to fade. Behind, a soft gasp reminded him he was not alone. Naruto turned to find Rose staring at him, eyes wide in disbelief. The expression on her face was a mixture of shock and awe, and a touch of fear. She had pressed herself against a tree during the fight, and though she tried to hide it, he could see her shoulders trembling. Whether from the attack or from witnessing what he'd just done, he couldn't be sure. The curious cat dropped down from its safe perch, landing lightly beside the Jabberwocker's disintegrating remains. It padded closer to Naruto, whiskers twitching. Goodness, it breathed, surveying the carnage. That was exhilarating. And here I thought it might actually eat you for a moment. Silly me. The cat tilted its head up toward him, grinning broadly. I must say, you continue to surprise. My dear Naruto. Such power, and such control. Hardly even a scratch on you. Sensational. Naruto ignored the praise. Is it dead? The cat tutted and raised a paw. Considering the disintegrating corpse as one would a curious bettle. You know, I'm not quite sure. I've never seen anyone best that beast before. If it is alive, you certainly gave it reason to think twice. As he looked on, the last of the Jabberwocker dissolved into harmless smoke and was swept away by a strong breeze. The curious cat flicked its tail once. Well, there it goes. I certainly hope that means it expired. Naruto didn't reply immediately. He flexed his fingers, the adrenaline of combat still leaving them tingling. He could feel Rose's gaze on him, and that kept the WILD elation of victory from fully settling. Would she look at him differently now? As a monster wearing a man's skin? He hoped not, but he wouldn't blame her if she did. After all, he'd felt it, the furious joy of the fight. The same kind of surge that had led him down dark paths before. He forced himself to take a slow breath and turn to Rose. Are you all right? Rose nodded, though her eyes never left his face. As if searching it for something. Yes, I'm fine. She swallowed. You saved me. Again. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly self-conscious. The way she said it, equal parts gratitude and uncertainty, made him acutely aware of how he must have looked moments ago. It caught us off guard, he muttered, words lacking their earlier rancor. I'm just glad you're safe. Rose's cheeks pinkened as she opened her mouth to speak further, only to be interrupted by an abrupt crack of thunder overhead. All three of them startled, heads snapping upward. Yet the sky had not changed, it remained the same dull, sunless gray. The thunder came again, not from above, but from somewhere in the distance. No, directly ahead. Belatedly, Naruto realized it wasn't thunder at all, but the sound of something crashing through the canopy of trees and underbrush not far from their position. Branches snapped and leaves billowed into the air as an object plummeted into the middle of the trail just a stone's throw beyond them. The ground shuddered with the impact. Rose gripped her staff, eyes darting. The cat arched its back, every fur on end. Naruto moved in front of his companions once more, wary that yet another threat had arrived so soon. A cloud of dust and petals, pale feathers, hung in the air where the thing had fallen. Naruto squinted through the haze, braced for another monster. Instead, he saw the shape of a person lying amid the splintered wood and churned dirt. Another one, Rose whispered in disbelief. Naruto approached carefully, motioning for Rose and the cat to stay back. As he drew nearer, details came into focus. It was a woman, sprawled face down in the debris of a shattered tree limb. She wore tattered armor over a dark crimson and black outfit. The design unlike any shinobi gear he'd ever seen, though somewhat akin to Rose's style of dress. A huntress's armor, perhaps. Long, black hair fanned out around her, streaked with what looked like soot and fresh blood. One of her arms was bent at an awkward angle. Whoever she was, she'd suffered a brutal fall. The cat bounded past Naruto, evidently deciding the newcomer posed no immediate danger. It prodded at the woman's side with a paw. My, it exclaimed, curiosity overtaking caution. You humans are just cropping up all over the place, aren't you? You're the third one this month after Rose. Wherever did you come from, Yoch? In a flash, the woman's hand had shot out and seized the cat's tail in a vice-like grip. The cat yelped, trying to pull free, but the woman held fast, even in what seemed like semi-consciousness. Her head lifted sluggishly, revealing a face smeared with dirt and blood. Fierce red eyes cracked open, blazing with confused determination. Where am I? The woman croaked. Her voice was strained, barely more than a gasp. Naruto quickly closed the remaining distance. The stranger's aura was alarming, she radiated raw intensity even as broken as she looked. He couldn't place why, but something about her reminded him of a cornered animal, lashing out in pain and panic. The cat was whimpering indignantly, still caught by the tail. Oh wow. That's actually quite painful. Would you mind releasing me? If the woman even heard the cat, she gave no sign. On the contrary, her grip redoubled. Dear heavens. Naruto, do something. Naruto knelt at the woman's opposite side, wary of her lashing limbs. Hey, he said firmly, trying to get her attention. Let go of the cat. We're not here to hurt you. Perhaps it was his voice or the shadow of his figure looming into her hazy view. But the woman abruptly lurched. In a single violent motion born of instinct, she released the cat and grabbed Naruto's cloak instead. Off balance from his crouch, he nearly toppled as she dragged herself halfway up by clinging to him. Her face was inches from his now, red eyes wild and unfocused. Who? She rasped, then her breath hitched. Up close, Naruto could see her injuries were severe, burns across her neck and the side of her face, cuts and bruises everywhere. How was she even conscious? Rose approached cautiously, concern overriding fear. Naruto caught her shaking her head in silent warning. But Rose knelt on the woman's other side, reaching out gently. It's all right, his fellow amnesiac cooed softly. You're safe now. We won't hurt you. The woman's eyes flicked toward Rose. Then back to Naruto. Her brow knitted. I don't. She tried to push herself further up, but her body betrayed her. A cry of pain tore from her throat and she collapsed onto her side. Naruto moved quickly to support her, easing her down with his arm behind her shoulders. Freed from the iron grip, the cat scampered out of reach, fur on end. Goodness gracious. It huffed, colorful fur bristling. Such ingratitude. I only asked a question. Naruto ignored the cat. His focus remained fixated upon the injured stranger now cradled against him. She was shivering uncontrollably, whether from pain or shock or both. A trickle of blood ran from her temple, and her breathing was ragged. Rose hovered at the woman's other side, looking lost but determined to help somehow. "Hey," Naruto said again. More gently this time. "Can you hear me?" The woman blinked rapidly. Her gaze, a vivid red, darted between their faces. "Who am I?" she whispered. The way she said it as gut-wrenching, a plea from someone utterly adrift. She lifted a trembling hand toward her own head, fingers closing in her dark hair as if searching for something that should be there. "Why can't I remember anything?" Naruto felt his heart sink. Not again. This was all too familiar. The broken arrival, the confusion and terror. Rose had been in the same state barely a day ago. Rose apparently realized it too. She reached carefully for the woman's hand, the one tangled in her hair, and clasped it. "You're suffering memory loss, just like me," she said softly. "I know it's scary, but we'll help you, I promise." At Rose's warm touch, the woman seemed to calm a fraction. But at the mention of memory loss, a fresh wave of panic seized her. "I don't know who I am," she said, voice climbing in pitch with each word. I don't know. Why can't I remember my name?" Naruto gently squeezed her shoulder. "It's all right," he soothed, using the same words he had offered to Rose, though they felt insufficient. "Don't force it. Just breathe. You're alive, that's what matters right now." She fixed him with a desperate look, as if he might conjure her very identity out of thin air. "How do I know I'm alive?" she choked out. Everything is blank. I was fighting, and there was fire, and screaming, and now." Her voice cracked, and she suddenly collapsed forward against his chest, sobbing with a raw, keening sound. Naruto froze for the briefest moment. This woman who radiated fierceness even in ruin was now clinging to him like a lifeline, her fists weakly bunching in his torn cloak as she wept. The sound of her anguish was nearly unbearable, dredging up echoes of his own hollow nights. He caught Rose's eyes over the trembling form. Rose looked stricken, tears in her own eyes in empathy. She gave Naruto a tiny nod, encouraging, as if to say, "It's all right. Comfort her." Awkwardly at first, Naruto wrapped his arm around the woman's shaking shoulders. He braced her with his body, letting her pour out the wordless grief and confusion. "I've got you," he murmured, not knowing what else to offer but those simple words. "You're not alone. We're here." She cried like a child, uninhibited wails that spoke of unimaginable trauma. Naruto held fast, weathering the storm of her despair until gradually, it began to ebb. The woman's sobs dulled to whimpers, then to uneven breaths. Finally, exhaustion claimed her. Her eyes slipped shut, and her weight sagged fully into his arms as she lost consciousness. For a long moment, the only sounds were the rustle of the trees and their own breathing. Naruto adjusted his hold on the woman, gently laying her back down so he could inspect her more closely. Rose wiped her own face with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. The curious cat crept nearer once again, though it kept a respectful distance from the unconscious stranger this time. "Well," the cat ventured quietly, "this is quite the predicament. 2 broken little humans in my care now. And here I thought one would be troublesome enough." Naruto shot the cat a look that was less glare and more weary acceptance. "What am I, chopped liver? Not at all, my good fellow." It flicked its tail towards him. "You, at least, can fight." Summer wilted, mistaking that for a jab at her own weakness. "Misori." Naruto sighed. "No one asked you to babysit," he said, though the words lacked heat. "Ah, but I must." The cat didn't cackle, but the sound was close, and its grin broad. "You humans are such a curious lot. I simply can't help myself." Rose brushed a few stray black feathers from the woman's hair, raven feathers, Naruto realized, scattered around perhaps from her arrival. She hesitated, then spoke softly. "When I first woke up here, I thought I remembered a name. I said, Raven." Naruto glanced at her in surprise. That was right, back in the glade, Rose had whispered the name Raven in confusion. He looked down at the unconscious woman. Raven. Black hair. Red eyes, it fit. "Raven," he said, testing the name as he gazed at the newcomer. It felt significant, as if saying it aloud anchored the woman slightly more to reality. Was it truly her name? Or just a coincidence? Either way, they needed something to call her. He wasn't about to label her, unknown girl, or, hey you. Raven, then, Naruto murmured decisively. Rose managed a small smile. It's a strong name. The cat swished its tail thoughtfully. Raven, Raven, why does that tickle my ears? Have I heard of a raven in the ever after? It shrugged. No matter. What now? Fearless leader. It peered at Naruto expectantly. Shall we rest? Or do we push on? Naruto frowned at the moniker. Leader. He certainly hadn't agreed to that. But looking at Rose, still standing by him, and Raven. Injured and insensate on the ground, who else was going to make the call? He exhaled and glanced around. They couldn't stay exposed on the path, though he'd slain the Jabberwocker. This part of the ever after clearly held dangers. Raven needed shelter and tending, and Rose was likely at her limit as well. First, we find a safe place to camp, he decided. Noting a cluster of boulders a short distance off the trail that could serve as a windbreak in defensive position. Over there. We need to rest and help her. Rose was already moving to grab one of the stranger's arms. Naruto nodded in thanks and hooked his own arm under Raven's legs. Together, he and Rose lifted Raven's limp form. She was surprisingly light for an adult, as though some of her UB stance had been seared out of her by whatever ordeal she'd endured. The cat bounded ahead, scouting the chosen spot for any nastiness. All clear, it called, perched atop a boulder. A cozy little nook, just for us. Naruto and Rose carefully carried Raven to the sheltered area and laid her down on a patch of soft moss between the rocks. Rose immediately took off her tattered cloak and folded it as a makeshift pillow for Raven's head. Naruto assessed Raven's injuries by the ambient gray light. The burns looked bad, skin angry red and blistered along the side of her neck and disappearing beneath her breastplate. Her left arm was certainly broken, given the unnatural bend. Dried blood crusted around a gash at her hairline. Yet through it all, she was breathing steadily, if shallowly. The T spoke of a certain resilience if nothing else. He was missing something here, but what? We need to set her arm, he said. As he did, his voice fell into a calm, clinical cadence that he remembered from countless field training sessions with Sakura and Kakashi. And clean that head wound, at least. Rose nodded, wiping the last wetness from her eyes. I can find water. There was a stream back a little way. I saw it, Naruto confirmed, but we shouldn't split up. The cat raised a paw. Allow me. I'm excellent at fetching things. One pail of water, coming right up. It then paused, realizing it had no such pail in its possession. I'll improvise. With that, the feisty feline scampered off, surprisingly dutiful. Naruto turned back to Raven. He tore a strip from the hem of his own cloak and wrapped it around his hand. Using a piece of shattered wood from Raven's crash landing, he gingerly straightened and splinted her broken arm, tying it firmly with lengths of cloth. Raven moaned faintly but did not wake. Rose watched, steadying Raven's shoulder as Naruto worked. You've done this before, she observed quietly. Naruto gave a half shrug. I've seen a lot of injuries. More than he cared to remember. Had good teachers. Soon enough the cat returned, walking on its hind legs, awkwardly carrying a large leaf curled into a bowl shape, the latter of which was filled with clear water. Rose took it with a word of thanks and began to gently clean the cut on Raven's forehead, as well as some of the soot and dirt from her face. Bit by bit, the woman's features became more apparent beneath the grime. High cheekbones, an angular face that even slack with unconsciousness looked proud and fierce. Rose dabbed the wound and frowned. Do you think she was a huntress? Like, from my world. Naruto squinted at her. Huntress. His fellow amnesiac leaned back, blinking at him. You act like you don't know the term. Because he didn't. Rose shook her head and considered the wounded woman anew. She has aura, like me. And that armor. I'd bet she is. Or was, she amended after a moment's pause. She managed a small smile. Maybe I'm not the only one who fell from Remnant. Huntress, aura, Remnant. Naruto filed the words of her world away for further consideration, even as an odd relief touched Rose's face as she gazed at Raven. If she is from my world, maybe she knows who I am, she whispered. Maybe she was looking for me. Naruto didn't want to dash that fragile hope, but he knew all too well the pain of disappointment. Maybe, he said carefully. But until she wakes and remembers. All we can do is keep her safe. Rose nodded, determination replacing some of the melancholy in her eyes. The cat settled itself on a perch of stone, wrapping its tail around its feet. Two lost huntresses and one shinobi out of place, it mused airily. What a merry band we've become. Naruto felt a flicker of dry humor. Merry, sure, he said. If you ignore the trauma. The cat chuckled. Oh, I never ignore trauma. It's terribly enlightening. Quite suddenly, it was Rose's turn to balk. What's a shinobi? Naruto palmed his face. Hoo boy, lot to unpack there. She scowled. You're not going to tell me, are you? Nope. Naruto rolled his eyes and looked out past the rocks. The ever-after's dim light was unchanged, but he felt the weight of time in his limbs. It had been a long day, perhaps several, by this world's strange measure. A day of nightmares, illusions, battles, and a new life literally crashing down before them. Raven let out a soft sigh in her sleep. Rose pouted, but finished her gentle cleaning and pulled a corner of her own undershirt up to better cover the unconscious woman for warmth. For a moment, she simply sat there, stroking Raven's hair with absent, soothing motions. It felt natural to her, Naruto thought, comforting a hurt stranger. Perhaps some instincts run deeper than memory. In the end he stayed sitting, back against the stone. He doubted he could sleep if he tried, too much whirled in his head. The cat had finished its brief survey and, evidently deciding the area was secure enough, padded back over to him. Without preamble, it hopped onto Naruto's shoulder once more and settled down like a smug sentinel. Naruto sighed but didn't bother to shoo it off this time. The small warmth and weight was oddly grounding. Together they watched Rose and the newcomer. Rose soon drifted into an uneasy sleep, one hand still resting on Raven's shoulder as if to assure both of them that the world was still there when they awoke. A faint rustle broke the quiet. Naruto glanced at Raven and saw her eyelids flutter. Slowly, the woman's eyes cracked open to thin slits. She gazed upward, her red irises dull with exhaustion and lingering confusion. Naruto followed her line of sight. It led straight to the curious cat perched atop him. Raven's brow furrowed slightly. In a hoarse, drowsy whisper, she slurred, "Why, is there a cat sitting on your shoulders?" Naruto blinked. The question was so unexpected, so utterly normal in its absurdity, that it took him a second to respond. He felt the cat's tail swish against the back of his head as it peeked down at their barely conscious guest. A wry smile tugged at Naruto's lips. In a low voice, he answered, "Why isn't there one on yours?" Raven made a tiny, confused sound. That might have been a laugh if she weren't half unconscious. But before Naruto could tell if she understood, her eyes slid shut again and she went still, succumbing once more to exhausted sleep. The cat chuckled softly, pleased either at Naruto's retort or at Raven's befuddlement. Naruto just shook his head in quiet wonder. In the span of minutes, he'd seen this woman at her most vulnerable and her most ordinary. That simple, delirious question felt like a glimpse of who she might have been before tragedy struck, a hint of humor or curiosity peeking through the cracks. When he was certain Raven slept soundly again, Naruto finally allowed himself to relax a fraction. He leaned his head back against the stone and closed his eyes, trusting his other senses and the cat to remain alert. Between the boulder crags above, a slice of ever-after's sky was visible. Gray, endless, yet as Naruto listened, he caught a whisper of movement in the air. A gentle breeze, scarcely strong enough to stir a lock of hair, wafted through the makeshift camp. With it came the faintest sound, like distant chimes or tiny bells. Perhaps it was just the rattling of some peculiar ever-after leaves. Or perhaps, Naruto fancied, it was the echo of soft laughter carried on the wind. He opened his eyes, looking up at the sky, and for a heartbeat he imagined he saw something drifting across that grim canvas, a small glimmer. A wayward dandelion seed floating free. He remembered the warmth of those seeds on Rose's hand, the light that had briefly touched her face. Naruto inhaled the cool air and felt it fill his lungs with a quiet purpose. The journey was far from over. Dangers lurked, and uncertainties lay ahead. But he was no longer walking alone in silent despair. He had people to protect, fragile as they were. And they, in turn, had given him a reason to move forward again. As the breeze died into stillness once more, Naruto found himself whispering into the dim, "We'll find our way. All of us." High on its perch atop Naruto's shoulder, the curious cat purred in agreement, or perhaps simply at the comfort of having company. In the hush that followed, Naruto let his eyes drift shut. Not in surrender to sleep, but in a moment of peace. The ever-after remained as eerily quiet as ever, but something had changed. Perhaps the wind had remembered how to carry hope, even in this place beyond worlds. Perhaps what was forgotten could yet be found. Naruto would see it through, whatever the ever-after had in store, whatever the tree held for them. Until then, he would keep watch over these two broken warriors at his side. And if the very wind itself had forgotten their names and stories, well, he would help it remember. Thanks for watching.